Custom event bindings. Sounds simple, right? Well, actually they are, especially for how useful they can be. With them, you can take the boring, ugly Fortnite elements like timers, trackers, and health bars and make them look good. There's tons of stuff you can do with them, but today we're just going to be focusing on the basics and how to actually use them. Wouldn't it be nice to always just be able to focus on making things look how you want them to, instead of having to spend loads of time writing code or fixing bugs? Well, actually, you can do that with the power of Map Academy's Creator Success Program. It's got all the things you need to make even better maps faster than ever before. From our huge library of different systems and tools to the support and assistance we provide to every member. It's got something valuable in it for almost all creators. So if you're interested and you want to take the next step in making Fortnite maps, then check it out. It'll be the first link in the description below. Anyways, let's get back to the video. To start off, there's a couple different devices that you can actually use them with, and we're going to start with the timer device. So we'll go ahead and make a custom timer widget that can be displayed on player's HUD. So to do that, I'm going to scroll in here, hit right click, go to user interface, widget blueprint, and user widget. I'll call this our timer widget, and then I'm going to open this up. Inside of this is where we're going to actually create our new widget that will replace the timer. So I'll drag a canvas panel onto the screen to start off. This will represent the player's UI. And then we're going to want to go ahead and add all of the components that we want to show with our timer. So I'll start off with a background image. I'm going to set the anchors to top center, and I'm also going to change the alignment so that it is set to top center like so. I'm going to set the X position to 0 so that it's centered. And the image I'm going to change to is going to be an image that I went ahead and imported. This can be whatever you want, but I went ahead and prepared some images before this. Set the scale to what I want it to be, which in this case is going to be 512 and 256. Then I'm going to go ahead and position this where I want it to be as well. And now we can actually add a text block. I'm just going to position this text where I want it to be. This will be our running timer text. So I want this to actually show how much time is left. So I'll just set it to a temporary text here just so we can visualize this better. I'm gonna change the justification so that it's centered, and let's say I want the outline size to increase, not that much, but let's say to something like 15, and then I'll actually make the text size something like 60 or even maybe 90. Go ahead and change the position of our text block so that it actually fits the size of the timer, and then position this where I want. Can probably make the outline a little bit smaller. There we go. And then I'm gonna want one other text block here, which I'll display the timer's name. So I'll just write timer's name right here. I'm gonna want the size to be much smaller. Let's say like 20, and a very small outline size as well. So that looks good to me. I could probably make this text size a little bigger than 20, maybe 25. And I think I'm happy with that. So now that I have my widget created that I actually want my timer to look like, how do I make our timer device actually use this widget here? Well, the answer to that is custom event bindings. So to use those, you want to go down here and click view bindings, and we'll get this error. To actually use this, we need to create a view model. So just go ahead and click add view model. And whenever you do this, you'll get this pop-up with a bunch of different options. What these are, if you notice, is all of the different UEFN devices that you can actually create view models for and that you can actually use. So we have a HUD controller, a beacon device, a HUD message device, skilled interaction, stat, timer, tracker. All of these are things that we can actually create custom HUD widgets for. For now, but for this, we're using a timer. So we'll just select the timer view model and then hit select. Now a bunch of stuff will pop up here, but we can actually just ignore that. And instead, go down here and click view bindings again. And now we don't have that error. So that this stays to my screen, I'm going to go ahead and click dock and layout so that now it'll appear here. So we have two options. We can add a widget and add a condition. In this tutorial, we're just going to focus on adding widgets. So I'll go ahead and start off by selecting the widget that I want to add a view binding to, and then I can hit this add button. And now we have this option that references this text block. If I go ahead and change the name of this text block to time display, you'll see it also changes here. But we get an error, and that's just because we don't have anything selected here yet. So to start off, this might look a little complicated, but all this is saying is that whatever is here is going to affect whatever is here, which in this case is this text widget. So we'll start left or right. We click on this button. We have a bunch of different options, but all of these are just components of this text block. So for example, we have the font, the text justification, the color, the opacity. There's a lot of different things that you can change for this text block, but the one we want to change here is just going to be the text. So we'll select text and select. So now we have specified what is going to be changed on this widget. We need to specify what is going to affect it. So if we click here, we have a couple options, but what we want is this view model that we just created that is for the timer. So we'll select that, and same as before, we have a bunch of options. So we have current time, the display text, the timer name. We have a lot of different options here, but what we want this to display is going to be our current time. So I'll go ahead and select that. And just like that, you've created your first custom event binding. But we're not done yet because we also need to include the timer's name. So we'll go ahead and select the name text, which I'll just go ahead and change the size so we don't get confused. Then I can go ahead and add that widget to a view binding. And in the text block, what we want to change is the text. And we want that to be affected by our timer's label text, which is the text the timer displays. And we only want this widget to display whenever the timer is running. So this is what we're going to use. I'll hit that and hit select. And just like that, we now have both of our view bindings set up. We can go ahead and hit compile and save. And now if we go ahead and close out of this widget, there's only one more step we need to do for this timer to actually be displayed like this. So if I select our timer, I'm going to want to go ahead and first set the duration to what I want, which is fine as is. Then I'll scroll down and set the timer running text to what I want, which in this case, I'll just say hurry up. And then lastly, I need to actually change what gets displayed here. So I'll scroll down, and all the way at the bottom underneath all of this, we have a custom widget class. So if we drop this down, you'll see we have our timer widget, which we can go ahead and select. I went ahead and made it so that this timer starts on this button, so we can go ahead and test it out and see what it looks like in game. Whenever you're creating these custom widgets for devices, the anchor point is always offset because the device has its own anchor point, which means the entire image is going to be a little offset. So all you need to do is accommodate for that manually by moving everything up, or sometimes it'll be to the side. It all just depends. But whenever you are making any changes inside of a widget like this, you will need to go ahead and push changes completely. All right, so now that I fixed that, if I go ahead and start it, the timer is about in the correct place, and we now have a fully custom timer. So that shows how easy it is to actually use these custom event bindings, but we can actually take it one step further and show more than just text. So I'm going to be going over one other device today, and that's going to be the tracker device. So we're going to go ahead and create a custom widget that we can then use inside of our tracker device. So we'll follow the same format as before. We'll create a new widget blueprint, user widget. I'll call this our tracker widget, and open it up. Inside of this, start off with a canvas panel, then create your widget. So I'll start by adding an image. I'll change that to an image that I went ahead and already imported. Go ahead and change the size and position it to where I want. Then go ahead and change the anchors so that it kind of aligns. I'll move it down here so that it's more in line, and I'll also shrink it a little bit. Now inside of this, I'll first drag another image. This is going to represent the icon. So I'll go ahead and position this where I want. I'll go ahead and start by changing it to a simple sword icon that's already inside of Fortnite, and we'll use this to display the trackers icon. Then I'm gonna drag a text block here. I'll move the anchors and change the alignment. Then I'm gonna go ahead and position it exactly where I'd like it to be, which is in this case directly above the image. I'll change the text size a little bit and give it a little bit of an outline. This is what I'll use to display the tracker's name, and I'll go ahead and change this text block to tracker name. Same thing for this image. I'm going to rename this to our icon image. Renaming your widgets is not required, but it does help whenever you're working with different view bindings. The next thing I'll do is copy our text and kind of go below and maybe decrease the size a little bit. And this will be the tracker's description. I'll also change the outline a little bit. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and create the progress numbers. So I'll go down here, and the first text is going to represent the current progress amount. So I'll want my text justification to be over here on the right. Go ahead and shrink this text block down a little bit. Then I'll copy this again and instead change the text to be a slash. The text justification doesn't really matter here because we're not going to be changing this text block. Lastly, we'll go ahead and do our total amount, which I'll just change to a number, and we're going to want the text justification here to be left. Now that we have these three created, I also want a way to show the progress with a bar. So I'm going to go ahead and drag an image here, and we'll say this is our progress bar here, which I'm going to go ahead and slant a little bit by affecting the shear like so. And then I'm going to go ahead and compile. So we have all of our different elements already added. We now need to just go ahead and make the view bindings for them. So I'll click on view bindings and add a view model, the same as before. Instead here, I'll select our tracker view model and hit select. Now we can open back up our view bindings, and I'm going to dock this in our layout. And we'll start off with our icon image. So if I click add widget icon image, we now need to select what we want to change inside of this image. Here we have a couple different options, but to be able to actually change the image, we want to select brush. And the reason that we're selecting brush is because if you look down here where we actually selected the image, this is right underneath brush. So that's just how you change the image. That's just what it's called in this. Then to actually decide what is going to affect the brush, we'll go to our tracker. Here we have our icon. So let's go ahead and select that and hit compile. But when we do that, you'll see we get this error. And what this is saying is that you can't bind a texture to a brush because that's just not the same thing. So what we instead need to do is go ahead and click here, and instead of instantly binding it to this tracker, we'll use one of these conversion functions. And there's a lot of different things in these, but what we want here is we want to make a brush, and we want to make it from a texture, which in this case is going to be this setting right here. I'll go ahead and hit select, and then inside of this, you can directly select an asset, but we don't want that. We want to link it to something. So we'll click this bind button. Then we can actually just select the texture that we want to use, which is our tracker's icon. Now, if we hit compile, this will be correctly binded to this image. And that's this image done. So we can now move on to the tracker's name. So just go ahead and add that. Here, it's pretty simple. We want to select the text, and to bind to that, we want to use the name of the tracker, just like so. That's all we need to do here. We can now do pretty much the same thing, except for with the tracker's description. So we'll set the text of the text block to our tracker's description. And that's that text block done. We'll now go ahead and move on to these three because they're going to be a little easier than this image. So I'll add our first text, which is going to represent the progress. Again, we want to change the text. And here, if we select our tracker and we select the value, as you can see, this value is not going to be able to assign to a text. If we hit compile, same as before, we'll get an error. So we need to pretty much do the same thing and instead use a conversion function. And we want to convert either a double or an integer to a text. In this case, our tracker value is going to be an integer, so I'll select that. Then down here as the value, we want to bind this and we want to bind it to our tracker's value, like so. And with that, we now have this text block done. We can go ahead and move on to the next, which is going to be this 3 here, which should represent the total progress. So just as before, we'll select the text. And then here we'll go to conversion functions, to text, integer, and we'll bind the value of that to our tracker's target value, like so. And that's all of our text blocks done. So the last thing we need to do here is our progress bar. So this is going to be a little more difficult if we go ahead and add our widget here. But as we get to this part of the image where we have to select what is changing, we can't actually change the image size, which is what we want here. So instead, what we need to do is create a UI material that will apply to this that we can then change in these view bindings. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this image entirely for now. So I'm going to go ahead and select this. I'm going to go ahead and select a material that I've created and then hit compile. And I'll go ahead and show you that material now. So I'll open it up. I'm not going to go ahead and try to explain how this works because if I'm being honest, I'm not sure. But shout out to How To Boss for his tutorial that I used to create this. But how it works is basically there's these two colors, and whenever you change this parameter here, it changes the percentage of overlap. So if this is 1, it's going to be full, 0, it's going to be empty. So I'll set this back to 0.5. And if you want to use this material yourself, you can just copy all of these nodes, or I'll have this also for download in our Discord, which you can find in the description below. So now if I go ahead and go back into our widget blueprint and I go ahead and add our image widget here that has this material on it, what I want to affect is actually going to be the brush. So select this because the brush is going to control how this image appears. But instead of changing anything, I actually want to go to the conversion functions and select set scalar parameter, because what we have here in the percentage is a scalar parameter. So we will select the set scalar parameter, and then in this we need to change two things. First is the parameter name, which will change to percentage. So this is the name of our parameter, which in this case is percentage. It needs to be named the exact same thing or else it will not link properly. And then the other thing we have is the value, which in this case we want to bind to the tracker's percentage. So I'll go ahead and hit select there. And just like that, this bar will now represent the tracker's completion percentage. And this image is now set up. So I'll go ahead and minimize that. One more thing I want to do is actually create a background for this image. So I'm going to copy that image and copy the canvas slot so that it's in the exact same position, except here I'm just going to clear the color of it, change the background to black, then make sure my other image is on top of it by increasing the Z order. And then lastly, I'm just going to make this slightly larger, so maybe 275 by 35. And then reposition it so that it actually acts as an outline, like so. And just like that, I can now go ahead and compile and save. And if I go into my tracker now, I'll have set to track, set to events, and I have this button here set up so that it's going to increment this tracker. But I'll go ahead and change the tracker title to progress. And then the description to this tracker tracks progress. Then the HUD widget is going to be the widget that we just created called our tracker widget. And I'm pretty sure everything else is fine. Also, you want to make sure that all of the anchors are at the same point so that everything stays aligned. So if I go ahead and push changes, all of the view bindings worked. And if I go over here and hit increase tracker, the progress also works. and whenever I complete it, the tracker goes away. So that covers the basics on how to use custom event bindings to make better looking mechanics. If you go to part 2, where I go into animations and some of the other features, then let me know by showing some love on this video. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.